Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the QT2 Run 2023 Boston Marathon race preview and pre-race tips. Our presenter this evening is Jon Falk. Jon is a coach with QT2 Run. He's been coaching with us for just over a year now, has been coaching overall, though, for about 15 years. Jon is ideally suited to be presenting this evening. He grew up on the Boston Marathon, just on the Boston Marathon course, and he is a lifelong runner. He's raced Boston 11 times. He'll be on the starting line again this year. He has run the course forward and backwards so many times. I think he's lost count of it. He's also coached for team and training on this course, so has been there supporting other runners along the way. He's run more than 50 marathons and ultras over the years. And this year he will be racing at the Age Group World Championships in Chicago, which is very select to get into. So pretty amazing there. Jon is just a little more on his background. He has an MS in sports and exercise science. He's an RRCA level 1 coach and USATF level 1 coach. Jon, thank you for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you, Reem, and thank you everyone out there who's joining us tonight. I am in fact at my parents' house, which is a stone's throw from the course. For those of you, when you're there on race day and you're making the right onto Com Ave off Washington Street, the second left is, you'll probably see a redhead. That'll be my mom. You probably see my kids out there too, among the crowds of people out there. So first of all, for everyone who's gonna be racing this year, congratulations. The hard part is really qualifying and getting in. And now, whatever your goal is, whether it's just to finish, enjoy the experience, or whether you have a time goal, this is, we're at the point in all of our training that we're starting to begin our taper, or will be shortly. And, we're kind of going to get ready for, really focused to have a good experience on race day. And so I'm here to help kind of guide you through that. I've literally run the course backwards and forwards. I did it last year, where I ran from the finish to the start and back again. I will be doing the same thing again this year in preparation for a 100 miler I'm doing in July. So I know the course very thoroughly, and I hope that will come across in my presentation tonight. Next slide. So kind of an overview of what we're going to be covering tonight, kind of touching on the main principles of QT2 training, going through the final weeks of kind of what to expect, and what's going to be going through your mind, and the things you want to do to get ready for race day as it gets closer. How to deal with the day before, the days before leading up to it, and on race day morning. Kind of a general course preview, kind of highlighting areas that I think are important to consider during the race, as well as pacing and fueling on race day. Pacing is, I think, the most challenging aspect of running Boston, because it is the layout and where the hills are, famous Newton Hills, just make it very challenging if you don't execute properly on race day. Next slide, please. So the 5 cornerstones of QT2 training are training, restoration, day-to-day nutrition, fueling, pacing, and mental fitness. And the whole purpose of this for QT2 is to kind of all-inclusive. You want to all aspects that can make you excel as an athlete, as a runner in particular, in our case. So it's a really, I think, an important way for coaching people, and for kind of all-inclusive process of getting you to do your best on race day. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, we're coming up to for most of us, the taper, if not this week, in the next couple of weeks, depending on whether you do a 2 or 3 week taper. So you're gonna have a few final key workouts to keep your sharpness during the taper. You're gonna be close, you're gonna keep the intensity, but you're going to be reducing the mileage. You're gonna be, it's not going to be as, you're gonna reducing the sheer volume of miles that you've covered over the past several months to get ready. Talk about the prepare yourself for that training you've been doing has prepared you for the initial downhill, which is very difficult to handle, very hard on your quads, and that's usually what hits people when they get to Newton Hills. So you also prepare yourself mentally and physically for the weather volatility. I've raced in everything from 40 degrees and rainy to 90s and sunny, and let me tell you, when it's 90s and sunny, there is no shade. There are no leaves on the trees in April, mid-April in Massachusetts, and so you have to adapt to what the conditions dictate if that occurs. And the theme that I will repeat throughout this presentation: control what you can control. And one of the things you cannot control for Boston is the weather. We all hope that we'll be getting good weather. I'm sure, like many of us, including myself, will be checking once that 10-day forecast comes out. But in typical New England weather for April, it's usually can be good, especially if you get a tailwind once you make the turn on come out. But there are you have to prepare yourself that those are things that you just can't control. So focus on the things that you can. Obviously, you want to be testing out everything you're planning on using on race day, both in terms of nutrition, in terms of the gear you're going to be wearing. You don't want to leave anything to chance. I'm sure if you're running Boston, I'm sure most of you are, if you're a qualified runner, or whether you're a charity runner, I'm sure you've done other races, but you want to make sure that the things that you're using are both appropriate to conditions you're going to be dealing with on race day in terms of weather, but also that will work for the distance depending on your experience with running a marathon. Next slide. So in the final weeks leading up to race day, you're going to be really kind of assessing where you're at in terms of what your training has got you to. And I hope in all your cases that has gone well, but it's important to be honest with yourself as to, sometimes injuries happen and maybe you've had to take time off, or maybe it hasn't gone exactly the way that you want it to have gone. And it's important to adjust your expectations accordingly. Because what will happen is if you go out in any race, if you go beyond, if you go out at a pace beyond what your fitness or the conditions dictate, you're going to blow up, and you're going to have a race experience that is not what you want to remember from your time in Boston. So you want to try and simulate those conditions and intensities to the best you can throughout your training. So you know that you can handle them on race day. Next slide. So in the final weeks, you want to focus on things that you can control. You want to continue to take your fluids in. You want to make sure you're eating a balanced diet, that you're getting all the nutrients you need to be able to execute on race day. Focus on sleep. I think that's probably the most important thing you can do, especially during the taper, but in general for training is getting adequate rest. And I know many of us, with our busy lives, that is not something that we're able to do sufficiently, but it's really, really important that you focus on that in the next few weeks, especially in the week leading up to race day, that you get enough rest. 7 to 8 hours minimum, more if you can. And I know for myself, that's not always in the cards, but the more consistently you're able to do that, the better your body will be prepared for the stresses you're going to be subjected to on race day. You try and incorporate aspects, nutrition aspects, omega-3s and other natural anti-inflammatories into your diet, just to try and get anything that may be flared up to calm down a little bit. Try and reduce the caffeine as best you can. That is a challenging one for me, but to the extent that you're able to, it is beneficial to do so. Make sure that you're carrying on water with you and drinking regularly. Just maintain that hydration throughout. So like I said, eat a relatively normal diet, especially leading up to race week. There's no need to try and make any dramatic changes, and obviously that can be potentially counterproductive. If it's trending that it's going to be a hot Boston, then definitely incorporate a little bit more salt to your diet as far as adding to your food. Obviously maintaining, like I said, hydration. Continuing to reduce the caffeine intake to the extent you're able to, making sleep a priority, and staying off your feet as much as possible. Just letting your body rest, let your mind focus on what you have coming up, especially as race week is upon us. Next slide. So, fuel according to your plan, whatever that might be. I'm sure all you know that on the course, it's Martin gels that they use. It is, I've used that in my training since it was introduced to the Boston course. It's a product that I like to use. Obviously, if you are using something else in your training, it's not advisable not to use something different or use what's on the course if you haven't trained with it. Because you don't know how your body is going to react. You want to stick to what you know on race day, kind of the maximum of racing in general, that you just stick to what you know, use what you've used in your training. If you want to use what's on the course, I definitely recommend, if you haven't already do so, to use some of the Martin gels. I'll be talking about where those gel stops are located on the course later on, but you want to make sure you use that product. Make sure that using a recovery drink as part of your training. What they're going to have on the course is Gatorade Endurance. Typically it's the lemon lime. It's pretty benign, but if that's not something you're used to, it's not what sure most of you know, but it's not the same product that you're going to get typically at the store. It has a higher electrolyte content and salt content to it, and so it's a little bit less sugar. So it's definitely something that you want to make sure that you tolerate, because not everyone does tolerate Gatorade Endurance as well as other products. On race day, fueling and hydration are like the two things that you can really control. That's something that is really in your power. Talking about, like I mentioned before, kind of controlling what you can control. That is something that you have within your power to control. So that is something that you should focus on leading up to it, as far as your preparation and the weeks we have left coming up to race day. That you make sure you stick to your plan, that you have a good idea of the products you're going to use, when you're going to take them on the course based on your training, and if you need to supplement that with stuff on the course, that you try the products and make sure that you are able to use them. Now, as far as mental fitness, and I think this is really the most important part of really racing in general, and I think it's something that's often neglected in training. It's something that we at QT2 Run try and focus on in our instruction as coaches. But the mental aspect of training is critical, and that it is really that partially comes from experience, but also trusting the process, trusting your training. Knowing that you can handle it, and belief in self when you're executing it on race day. So leading up to race week and race day, you want to try and reduce the external pressures that you have on you. And like, we all live in the real world, and that can be challenging. But the extent that you can, I like to really, especially on race week, get to a very, just maintain a very quiet, subdued existence, because I just prepare myself for the frenzy of activity that will happen on race day, especially if you have to travel to get there, and the stress is involved in that, and that is, I think, adds to that. So try and reduce whatever you can do in your preparation, as far as making it easier for you leading up to race day. Do it. Again, focus on what you can control, focus on your fueling, focus on your hydration. Trust the process, trust your training. Really think about how you want to experience it. Imagine yourself, watch the course videos that are on YouTube. Put yourself there. Imagine how you want to experience it, how you're going to approach it. Visualize how race day is going to unfold for you. And this is really, important way to actualize it on race day. I like to set goals for all my races. I usually have my A goal, my super secret goal that I don't tell anyone, and my B goal And I tell people, and I have my C goal is the goal that I can live with on race day. So however you want to kind of break that up, it basically allows you to, ensure that whatever happens, that you can have a good experience on race day. If you have set appropriate goals based on your training, based on how you want to experience the race, and really internalize what you're going to experience on race day. Certainly as we get closer to race day, we know what the conditions will be. You just prepare yourself for what you're going to see out there on the course. Next slide. So let's talk about pre-race logistics. And so the challenging thing is, when you're coming from out of the area, as I'm sure many of you, if not most of you will be, is that traveling to races, especially a goal race, is stressful, which, as I just mentioned before, is one of the things you want to avoid. So whatever you can do leading up to it to make it easier for you, upgrading yourself if you can on your flight, or whatever it might be to just make it less stressful. Getting there early, extra early on when you're flying out, so you're not rushed. Making sure you're packed days in advance and going through your list of the things you want to have with you. Making sure that everything is ready to go on race week, and certainly on the day that you're traveling to come to Boston. Making sure that all your items are, your watch is functioning right. That you pack your power cords. I can't tell you how many times people have forgotten to bring their power cord to their watch, and they think if they go to the expo or to a local running shop they'll be able to find one. And let me tell you, you won't be able to find one anywhere in the Metro Boston area, because there's enough people who have that same problem that don't let it be your problem. Making sure that you check your reservations, making sure that everything's set ahead of time so that it is not stressful, that you can maintain kind of inner calm and peace, and that anything race specific that you need to have ready, that you take care of beforehand. Next slide. So the expo starts on April 14th between 11 and 6, and it goes all through the weekend. The expo is going to be a little bit different than it was last year, in that it's not going to be as big, as there not going to be as many vendors. They're limiting it to like main sponsors. There's still going to be like a decent selection of things to peruse and browse, but something I'm a little bit disappointed about, because that was one of my favorite things, was at least the pre-COVID Boston Expo was second to none. So it's going to be a little bit different this year, but I think still enough to be worthwhile. And there will be, if there's particular brands, I know a lot of the running shoe companies that aren't representing the expo, which is basically everyone but Adidas, are setting up pop-up shops in the area around the convention center. If you have any questions, just reach out to me, because I'm kind of plugged into that for my day job. I work in run specialty, so I kind of know where things will be at. So definitely reach out to me if you have any questions or any particular brand that you're looking for. I can try and find that out for you. I like to recommend to go to the expo early, because the simple reason is just to get it out of the way. And from my experience, when I've gone later, I've gone as a Sunday afternoon in 2017 to get my packet, and they didn't have any men's small. So, people are allowed to try on and resize. So it's not guaranteed that you'll get the size shirt that you want. So if that's something that's important to you, better go early and take that out of the equation. There are a lot of things that you'll be able to try at the expo. I would refrain from doing so until after the race. You don't want to know, you just don't know how you're going to react. You want to mitigate and reduce risk of anything, unforeseen reactions to something that just doesn't agree with your stomach. So try and hold off to the extent you can. Don't try anything new that you might be given a free sample of at the expo. Just better to be safe than sorry. Next slide. So the day before, definitely recommend that for breakfast is when you want to be kind of focusing on, a large carbohydrate based meal. And that's because it gives you time to really digest and process everything. If you're counting on like your your supper, your dinner the night before, it just may not be enough time for you to digest everything and really get the benefit from it. Not that you should refrain from it, but that you should, you shouldn't really overeat. You don't want to feel bloated. You don't want to, you want to have everything, have been, processed, so to speak, and you want to be able to not have too many unscheduled trips to the porta potties on race day. Just gradually reduce the amount that you're consuming throughout the day and have at least a light supper. Again, hydrate, irregardless of the temperature. Again, avoid caffeine so that you're able to get a good sleep. Try and stay off your legs to the extent you can. Not that you don't want to get in, as I'll go into in a second. You fine line between moving too much and not moving enough. So when I like to kind of make it a really, really early evening or early afternoon for me, get back to my hotel, get my legs up, and just relax. Just again, kind of keep things calm. Let your body just prepare. Let yourself prepare physically and mentally for the stressors that you're going to be subjecting to the next day on race day. Next slide. So, for those of you who are coming from out of the area and maybe have a long flight to get here, maybe even from overseas, you want to make an effort to get moving somewhat. So whether it's the day before or 2 days before, getting in a shakeout run, getting a little bit of movement to kind of keep things loose, maybe do a gentle stretch, maybe use a massage gun on any lingering areas that are feeling a little tender or sore. It's a fine line between not doing anything and getting tight and doing too much. Like if you're coming to Boston and this is your first time coming to Boston and you want to do a lot of sightseeing, I mean, if you're going to do something like go on one of the buses that goes around the city and get off a little bit here and there, probably fine. But I definitely wouldn't necessarily walk the Freedom Trail the day before a race day. Try and reduce the amount of time you're on your feet. Try and, to the extent you can, have your sightseeing after the race so that you can, really focus on why you're there, which is to run a good race. Next slide. So the night before Boston, night before any race is, I think, the moment of like getting everything organized, making sure that you know where everything is, that your watch is charged, that that you have everything out, that making sure that you didn't forget anything at home, and that if you need to make a run out to grab something quick, do so. Make sure you go to bed early, set multiple alarms. If you're at a hotel, have a wake-up call, just kind of have that multi-layered approach to make sure that you're up and ready to go early enough to get out the door and you get to drop off your bag if you're doing so and getting to the buses. Make sure, like I said, everything is ready to go on race day. That's happened to me once where I had forgotten. I thought my watch was charged, and on race day, it wasn't. I happened to have a backup running watch with me because that's just how I think, and that was fine. But these are things that you want to you don't want to be surprised with on race morning. I think it's like there's nothing. I make sure that my number's been on the night before because it's it's just the little things that you don't want to do at the last minute. It'll stress you out. It will kind of it'll put you in a suboptimal place mentally. Next slide. So set all your stuff out, know where it is, have everything out the night before. The last thing you want to be doing is digging through your bag trying to find stuff on race morning. Making sure you have things like Body Glide or whatever, if you're using any kind of product to prevent chafing or blistering, know where that is. Make sure you have it. Make sure that you have your drop if you're having a checked bag, that you have everything in there that you want to have access to after the race, especially if you don't have anyone meeting you to have your stuff available for you. Just all those things, you want to reduce the stressors on you, so you can focus on what you have coming up. And it's happened to me where the night before you just can't sleep, or you can't get hard falling asleep, don't watch the clock, don't stress. I feel like the most important night's sleep is really 2 nights out. If you can get a good night's sleep the night before, that's just a bonus. But if you can't get to sleep, just focus on that, staying peaceful, maintaining a peaceful thought, and not allow it to distract you. Don't watch the clock. You can still, even on it the night before, if you don't get a great night's sleep, you can still run a good race. My PR, when I ran my PR many years ago, it was after getting 2.5 hours sleep because I couldn't fall asleep and I was watching the clock. But because I had good sleep leading up to it, as you will too, that allowed me to still execute on race day. Next slide. So breakfast on race morning, simple carbohydrates, fluids that have electrolytes in them, a little bit of protein. Some of the things I recommended are applesauce banana. One of my go-tos is a banana with a little bit of peanut butter on it. Get a little bit of protein that way with the carbohydrates from banana. The combination, pretty benign, easy for me to stomach. So I'm sure most of you already have kind of go-to race day foods you like to have, and just those are things, again, you want to make sure if you're not bringing them with you, that you pick them up a day or two out, so you're not scrambling on race morning to find that whatever you is your kind of your comfort food before a race. Sip, and really make sure that you're not having anything significant after, you want to make sure anything you're ingesting is about 3 hours or more out. Anything beyond that, you just sip on some, sports drink, maybe have a gel, 15 minutes to 30 minutes outside of the race start. But, really you don't want to, again, kind of feel bloated. So just kind of monitor your intake leading up to it, and your fluid intake. Don't drink too much. Just gentle sips throughout to help kind of calm your nerves if you feel like you need to take something in. Next slide, please. So the bag checker you see on the next map in a sec is located. It used to be you could take a bag, you take your drop bag to the start, but that probably 10 or 12 years ago, that switched. I think it was after the bombing, in fact. So now you have basically a small quart-sized bag that you can take to the start. You can't bring any kind of, just, if you're used to using a race back, like a running backpack, you can't bring it. You can bring a fluid belt, but that's that's really the only external thing that you can, or a handheld you can bring with you. Anything else has to fit into your that small quart-sized bag. You leave your drop bag near the finish, and so you don't have to worry about it getting back to the finish after you're dropping off. It'll be there. And they have UPS trucks that the bags are loaded into, and it runs pretty smoothly. I haven't had any trouble with getting my bag after the race at Boston. They have suggested loading times. I would stick to them. It's taking the bus is the only guaranteed way to get to the start on race day, and you don't want to try and Uber to the start because you won't be able to get all the way to the start. And unless, if you don't know that the spots to the kind of semi-secret spots to get dropped off, even those are still like a mile to a mile and a half from the start. So get on the buses. That's the only guaranteed way of you getting to the start at time, and definitely go within the recommended time ranges on this page as far as, so you get to the start in time for your wave, and kind of so you can settle down and kind of hunker down until your wave starts. The buses, only the people with the bib will be allowed to board the buses, so none of your friends or family will be able to come on the bus with you. just people running the race. There are no bathrooms on the bus. They use school buses for Boston, so there are plenty of porta potties in the areas where you board the buses. Use them there, because what will happen is if you don't, you will have to go immediately when you get there with hundreds, if not thousands, of other people who go to the first porta potty they see after after getting off the bus. So don't be that person. Take advantage of it if you need to go early before you get on the bus. Next slide. So here's just a map of the area. It's the buses load between the Boston Commons and Public Gardens. A lot of the hotels I'm sure many of you will be staying at are located in that vicinity of the Boston Commons and Public Gardens. Beautiful area if you have a chance to walk around, either before or after race day. It's a really lovely spot. You can see on the lower left corner of that map, that's where the buses are. That's where the vans are for the UPS vans for depositing any drop bag that you want to have. That would go there, and just a short walk to where the buses are. There are going to be a lot of people milling about. Know where you're going. Know where you're going before you leave the hotel. Just understand, even if you have a phone with you navigating, it's just know your route to where you need to go on race day. Again, minimize the stresses. You don't want to be running around trying to figure out where you drop your bag. Then how do I get to the start? It's not far, but you just want to really reduce those stresses. Have that planned out in advance. Next slide, please. So the start area is at the Hopkinton High School. It's in a big field. There usually would be several big tents set up on days where it's raining. Like for instance, any of you had ran in 2018 during it was kind of the monsoon year. Those areas become pretty crowded. The areas around there get pretty muddy. So depending on the weather, you want to make sure that if you either wear an old pair of shoes and then carry your race day shoes in a bag, or take proper precautions, because what happens is on really any rain, the areas around these tents where most of the people will be seeking shelter become a moat, and stepping through that becomes treacherous. Hopefully that won't be an issue for us on race day, but these are just things to keep in mind. Also, if the temperatures are going to be on the lower side, make sure you have some throwaway clothes. It can get pretty chilly, depending on what wave you are in. You may be waiting there for some time. So make sure you have adequate, throwaway clothes. Everything gets picked up and is donated to charity. Anything worth saving is donated to charity, so it gets put to a good use. So don't feel bad about leaving it. There are places where you can deposit on your way to the start. So, but make sure that you are dressed accordingly, and that you don't want to start the race hypothermic if it's a cold day. There's just things to think about to avoid. Next slide. So you can see this is a map of the area. You can see where the depiction where some of the tents are. It'll drop you off at the high school, like I said. It's a high school, middle school area. There's a large staging area. There'll be announcements over loudspeakers. Listen for your wave. Listen, keep an ear open for anything that might be important and relevant to you. There will be some area where you can get both Gatorade or water, as well as often bananas or bagels. There will be Dunkin' Donuts coffee for those of you who need a little caffeine fix before you start. All this stuff will be available to you. So you don't have to, if you forget to, or you don't have anything that you brought with you to kind of gnaw on at the start area, you'll be able to have access to stuff, so you will not be left without. The walk from the staging area to the start is about 0.7 of a mile. I usually use that time to warm up a little bit, because there really is no place around or in the starting corrals to warm up. So I kind of do some kind of pickups along the way, short pickups, kind of keeping things loose, getting things warmed up. That is really the only time you'll be able to do it. Once you get to the area around the corrals, and certainly into the corrals, you won't have the opportunity to really warm up effectively. There will be on your left before you make the turn at the end of the street to the area where the street the corrals are on. You can see there's a large area of, it's like a city of porta potties. So that is kind of a good, there are literally hundreds there. So will not have a long wait. Definitely, if you need to take advantage of them, take advantage of them. Next slide, please. So this is kind of shows the approximate times that you will be called over. It's not written in stone. Obviously, it depends how things evolve on race day, but it at least gives you a heads up going in once you get to the start area about when you need to be aware that you're going to be making your way to the start area. You don't want to be caught the last minute frantically trying to get your stuff together after you spread out, anticipating a long wait. So this is available also on our website, but we will have this, you can go through this again when this is posted on YouTube if you to look at all this information as well. Next slide. Here's just a overview of the course. It makes its way through 7 communities. Is really, I mean, as Reem said, I grew up here. I been going to the race before I ran the race. Almost every year, at least that I was in the area, and it's really part of the community. I think that's something that you will see those who haven't been to Boston or haven't run Boston, is how it's really embraced by the community, and how each town you run through has its own distinct character, whether it be the Scream Tunnel at Wellesley College. Or the students at BC who've had one too many to drink, cheering you on. It's really, you get a sense of the community and how important it is. The race takes place on a Monday, as all you know, and it's the third Monday of every April is Patriots Day. It's the day that the British marched on Lexington and Concord in the beginning of the Revolutionary War, and that is reenacted on that day. It's a state holiday. And so it's very much a Massachusetts kind of Boston metro. It's everyone knows someone is running. Everyone, almost everyone will often have seen it. Many people going every year. So it's really it's fun to experience as a runner, and I hope you will enjoy it. Next slide. So we've all heard about Boston, and it's a net downhill course, but I assure you it does not really feel that way. There definitely are some pretty steep declines, certainly at the beginning. I'll be talking about that in a sec, as well as the famous Newton Hills, which I think often have people mildly terrified, but they're not nearly as daunting as I'm sure some of the hills you may have gone up in other races. Partially has to do obviously with where they occur in the race, but they're nothing that's insurmountable if you pace yourself properly throughout the race. Boston is an effort course, so that you really want. So you will not necessarily be running. I don't think anyone who's run Boston properly will be running negative splits, but you'd be running, the idea is to run negative effort in the sense that you are building up as far as your effort level throughout the race, so that when you're cresting Heartbreak Hill and you have that nice downhill in the last 5 miles, that you're able to take advantage of that and finish strong. Next slide. This is just kind of shows the main hills throughout the Boston course. Feel free to take a screenshot of it if you just want to know where things are, but it's really nothing daunting, nothing overwhelming. If you practice running hills in your training, you can handle the course. If you're fueling properly and you get enough rest, you can handle the course. So just don't let yourself get intimidated by the kind of by the folklore of the Newton Hills. Next slide. So For race day nutrition, make sure you follow your plan. You know, when you want to have, make sure you know in advance when you're going to be taking the gels. Assuming you're going to be taking the hydration on course, they are every mile, not starting at mile 2. So there are plenty of opportunity. In fact, if it's if you want to make sure you don't take too much, you don't need to necessarily take it every water stop, but it won't be an issue if you need to take your gels with fluids, as most gels need to be consumed that way. You can time it pretty easily to kind of when you have done it in your training. It shouldn't be an issue. The Martin gel would be Poland spring water and lemon lime endurance Gatorade, as I mentioned before, starting every mile after mile 2. The Martin energy shots will be looking at 3 places on the course, which I think they started a couple years ago. As far as used to be just 2. So starting at mile 11.8, mile 17 in Newton, and mile 21.5 just after you get to the bottom of Heartbreak Hill, having passed Boston College. Again, if you're planning on using what's on the course, I'm going to harp on this again. Make sure you've tested these things in your training, so that you know that it will not impact you in an unexpected way. Next slide. So, pacing on race day. Now, in my opinion, the best way to pace Boston is by effort. You often people will tell you that don't go out too fast on downhills, hold back. And from my perspective is that you don't want to hold back too much, because I think most people tend to do it to the extreme. You don't want to, if you're holding back running the downhills of the first 6 miles, you're really actually going to be braking more. So you want to kind of allow your body to just flow downhill. You don't want to be, you want to try and counter for the impact of all the adrenaline that's going to be coursing through your body during the beginning of the race. I often see that my heart rate will drop, 5 to 7 beats, once I settle down. All that excitement, I think, is you just want to try and, I think gets to almost everyone. So you want to just kind of focus on just it feeling easy, effortless. Having done executed a proper caper like you will have, having prepared in your training like you have done, it's going to feel effortless. Keep it that way. You don't have to hold back excessively. Basically, you just don't want to overstride. You don't want to have a split that's going to be significantly faster than what you would expect. You're going to be running faster downhill. It's going to take less effort, but if you're running a minute faster or 45 seconds faster than an appropriate mile split, then you may be going a little bit too hard. You may be a little bit too amped up from the start of the race. I have a couple links here, a couple race calculators that are attuned to the Boston course, so that you can get a sense of like the spread of the splits would be. Ultimately, I think Boston's of course about letting the course come to you, and that just always focusing on keeping it easy. You want to kind of maintain your energy level so that you can really get to the top of Heartbreak Hill and be able to run the last 5 miles aggressively. It's when you don't do that that you will lose time on those last 5 miles, because you've overdone it. You've run the hills too strong. So these are things you want to avoid. Next slide. So like I said, pacing and race execution are utmost important for Boston. There are no pace groups. A lot of the bigger marathons, I know I ran Chicago last year, that has pace groups. I'm pretty sure New York does as well, from what I remember. So there will not be pace groups. So what I like to do during the race is, usually what will happen is, I'm sure you've all noticed, is during the race, everyone kind of gets to their, it kind of extends out, and everyone kind of gets to a group of people running around the same point, the same pace. Talk to people around you, get a sense of who's doing what, working with people, especially when conditions on a windy day, running in a group, shielding yourself from a headwind. shielding yourself from the elements is helpful. So, working with other people, to see this opportunity to collaborate with other runners. I like to think of Boston as an effort course. Your splits are going to be all over the place. Again, that's why I like to focus on effort, RPE as a way of delineating, how I should be, how I feel at any given moment. You want to modulate. You can also modulate by power or heart rate. Though I feel like, again, it's just there are other things that can impact those. But whatever tool you use to modulate your effort, that's what you should be focused on. Not your splits. Everything will fall in place if you're executing it, appropriately. Everything's going to fall in place. Your splits will be where they're supposed to be at a given point in the course, if you're running it the right way. Now, from my perspective, again, I don't think from Boston successfully, and I'll kind of go into the numbers of this in a moment, but negative split, because as I kind of tongue in cheek point out, like, are you really going to run up the hills? Like, are you going to be able to negative split through the hills? And no, the answer is no, you won't. So don't try to. You want to kind of work your way through the hills, maintaining that even effort up the hills, taking advantage of the downhills, and as I'll show in a slide coming up, kind of get the flow to that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about just in general things as far as running and pacing on hills. So, there is for every great percentage of gradient incline, there is an impact to you by 12 to 15 seconds. Going back along the lines of, are you really going to be going up the hills at negative splits? So in every degree of downhill will aid you by 8 seconds. Now, that's just math. And so, if you take the hills too easy, if you don't kind of make an honest effort up the hills, you're not going to be able to make up as much time on the downhills. Just math. So for every 10 feet of elevation change, there's a 1.74 altitude time by 1.74 seconds, regardless of the horizontal distance covered. Again, just math. So, that's why I keep on going back to the idea of Boston being an effort course, like knowing your body, knowing what you can maintain, having a sense of, distance to, the distance you have left to cover, how you're feeling in that moment, and then you modulate your effort accordingly. Next slide. So the average temperature in Boston is a high of 56 and low of 46. So within the range of optimal temperature. Technically, most kind of the fastest marathons are typically run between 45 degrees to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the optimal temperature typically. And then below and above that range, that there's a impact on performance. And times tend to be slower the further you go below and the further you go above. But certainly, in my experience, I mean, above 100%. It's just, you have to, again, control what you control. If you're confronted with weather that is not allowing you to, run at the pace you were hoping to, you need to dial it back in order to, adjust to what the conditions are giving you. Most non-elite runners who perform optimally, like I said, between around 44 to 50 degrees. Next slide. So, again, another aspect is humidity and dew point. So, dew point is the absolute measure of moisture in the air when the combination of humidity and air temperature is a point where your body is, it's basically the sweat, the perspiration is unable to evaporate because there's so much moisture already in the air. And that's actually more impactful on performance than humidity. I mean, they're linked, but dew point is actually has a bigger impact on you. And basically, your body's way of cooling itself, perspiration, is rendered ineffective. And in these conditions, again, you have to deal with what the conditions give you. So you have to kind of dial it back to so that you're not that your body is able to maintain equilibrium. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that's based on a study. What do we, if you actually go forward one more, Reem, we'll come back. So this is a graph based on 150,000 marathon finishes in Boston from 2011 to 2016, excluding the bombing year. The average participant, starts 8 to 9% faster, kind of along the lines of going out too fast. Adrenaline courses through your body, taking those downhills too fast, and then finishes 10 to 12% slower. PR runners, people who run the best time out of 3 or more finishes, tend to fall within a range of 9%. So less from negative 4% to start to 5% of pace, total pace at the end. The elite runners start out 3% faster and finish only 3% slower. So just a small gap. If you could go back one slide, Reem. So the green line is the impact, the pace percentage of overall pace of the average runner. You can see that as the course over the course of the race, that goes up, and then that the last little bit, as they finish near the finish, you see a little bit go down, but you can see no negative split there on average. The blue line is the kind of people running their best Boston out of 3 or more finishes. Again, especially as you can see, the shaded area is the topography of the course, the elevation of the course, and you can see, like, once you hit those Newton Hills in that last third, those sharp uphills, you can see everyone slows down. The average runner, the PR runner is taking it down a little bit at the end, but still relatively flat. But they're taking advantage of that decline through it. The elite runners are not negative splitting on this course on average. You can see even at the end they have a little bit of burst, but it's everything over the course of the race. They're getting a little bit slower throughout the race. Next slide. Actually, 2 slides up. Sorry. Race day factors that are impacting your pacing. Obviously, course elevation, weather, all these things we talked about. Making sure you're running the tangents. I'm sure all of us have finished the race, and our watch will click off after running 26.2 miles, and we're not even close to the finish line yet. That's where we're reminded all too well that we did not run the tangents effectively. The great thing about Boston is there aren't a lot of turns. You don't have to be worried about running keeping your line. It's not too hard to keep your line. Certainly after it spreads out a little bit. Once you get 5 or 6 miles into the race and you have a little bit more room to run, you won't be able, just looking ahead, being present in the moment, making sure you're taking the best line possible at every given moment. It all adds up to less real estate you have to cover than if you're following people like lemmings going, not taking the curves right. The only real sharp turns you have to do are when you get on the Comm Ave, getting off Comm Ave on the connecting to Beacon Street, and then at the famous right on Hereford, left on Boston. So you don't have to worry about like really tight corners for the most part. Just a few throughout the race. It's not like running into New York City or Chicago, where there are multiple turns that you have to really try and keep a close line. If you're keeping a relatively good route through the race course, you should be all right. You shouldn't be covering too much extra distance. Also keep in mind, all those stops along the way. Practice if this is, if you haven't done a lot of marathons, you practice drinking on the run. Practice picking up, being handed cups of water so that you get used to doing these things. I'm sure many of you are experienced. This is all, it's all stuff that you've done before. But for those of you who haven't run as many races, just those are things to keep on practicing so that on race day you're doing that as efficiently as possible. Every time you slow up to get a cup of water, you're losing seconds on the race. And if you have an aggressive time goal, those kind of aspects of things you can point to that are why you didn't achieve what you want to do on race day. Obviously stops along the way. Keep that in mind. That depending on what your goals are, that these things can impact how you're going to do. Also, again, don't go out if you. I mean, you want to pass people, but do it in an efficient way. Don't wildly zigzag, especially at the beginning of the race where it's a little bit tight running. Try and find an open lane and stick to it. Don't try and zigzag. Again, you're just covering more real estate. You're just making it harder for you later on in the race. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the course. The advantage, take advantage of that speed in the beginning. The average participant starts approximately 8:15 minute mile pace, but gradually slows and finishes at a 10-minute mile pace, equating to that you're running 8 to 9% faster and then finishing 10 to 12% slower, as we talked about. Just kind of people are going out too fast. There's a fine line. You can go fast, but you can go too fast, and then that's going to really compromise you later in the race. So a typical runner, like we talked about in that previous in that study, starts out only about 4% faster than their average race pace. So because you're running downhill, it's like a 5 to 6% downhill grade over most of the first 5 to 6 miles. And so you're going to be running faster. It's going to be easy. In fact, like I said, if you're holding back and purposely trying to run slower, you're actually going to be impacting, that braking. It's going to be a braking motion to your stride. It's going to be really stressing your quads and your hamstrings, and you're going to really regret that when you're trying to climb up through the hills. The elite runners, again, are starting out, a little bit faster, but roughly 3% faster. They run closer to their average race pace towards the end of the race. That final finishing kick that many of us mere mortals wish we had. So take advantage of that downhill in the beginning. The 6 to 9, gentle rolling hills, really, through mile 11. Just past mile 12, you're going to hear the famous scream tunnel of Wellesley College. You can hear them literally a quarter mile out. You'll hear them long before you will see them. Be careful when you're going through that, in that you get so energized by that you'll find yourself running, if you're not careful, 15 to 20 seconds faster than what you should be running to that point. And then as you make your way through Wellesley into Newton, there's a steep downhill, roughly a mile long, that takes you to the overpass, which is, we talked about, in fact, kind of the unofficial first hill of the Newton Hills. That's another great area to get some speed. Again, you don't want to slow up at these points. You want to take advantage of speed, but don't overstride. Keep it effortless, keep it smooth, keep it easy. Next slide. So the first of, and I think in some ways the most challenging hill of the Boston Marathon is the overpass. That's because you can often be hit by a really tough crosswind. There really aren't many people at that point. There may be a handful of people along the overpass, but you feel really exposed, and you are to the elements there. Once you get past there, there's a little bit of a net downhill as you make your way past in Wellesley Hospital, and to the last little section of Washington Street. and then you'll be right before you make the turn, you'll be passing that the Martin gel station that I referenced earlier. Then you make the turn on around the firehouse, and then that's when if that overpass doesn't get you, that's when it gets real. The second hill is a little steeper, lasts about a quarter of a mile. It gets your attention. I mean, this is when you really have to kind of bear down, focus on keeping that effort even. It's when it's going to start to hurt. It's when you start to get into glycogen depletion. It's when you're like, if it's a year where you get a headwind, you're going to feel that wind, and it's going to suck. That's something you can't control. Be smart. If you're running into headwind, tuck in behind people. You have to be really smart through the hilly section, the Newton Hills. You have to ride them really smart. Keep that effort even, and then recover. Then again, up the uphill, even effort. So the third hill comes after mile 19, lasts about a quarter of a mile, and then you finally come to Heartbreak Hill. You're gonna know when you're on Heartbreak Hill because it feels like it's going on forever. It doesn't go on forever, but if you've paced yourself properly up to that point, if you modulate your effort appropriately, it's gonna be a tough climb. But like once you make that crest, that's when you can see the John Hancock Tower, the Prudential Building. It's like you can almost it's almost like you see the finish line. It's just gonna be drawing you forward every step going forward. It is grueling to get through, but you guys can do it. Next slide. So this is just a brief illustration of kind of what I was just talking about with the grades of each of the hills and the distance. Short distances, short uphills, and you can see that it's like steps. Uphill and recover, uphill and recover, uphill and recover, and then look at that once you get to the top of Heartbreak Hill. Like a really, like a significant net downhill the last 5 miles or so. That if you've run appropriately up to that point, you can really crush that downhill. There are a few ups along the way, but just small, but it's a significant net downhill the rest of the way. You can really finish the race strong. You can make that finish that you have envisioned on, and all those training runs you put in. You can actualize that by running that last little bit less than 10K strong, and taking advantage of those downhills and just cruising. It feels amazing. Like when you do that, you'll know it when you get to the top of Heartbreak Hill, and you just know that you can just push through, just cruise on those downhills. It feels amazing. It's hard to do. I mean, I feel like only a handful of the times I've run Boston, I actually really did it right. But I know when on those years that I ran most successfully, it was the ones where I was very tactical about how I modulated my effort throughout the course of the race. And then I saved myself with, I let myself put myself in a position where I could run the last 5 miles strong. Next slide. So, like I said, after you get past Heartbreak Hill, like it's a really steep downhill on the other side of Heartbreak Hill. But so there's the net downhill as you're cruising down the Com Ave. You make your way across onto cross street that takes you to Beacon Street, and then left on Beacon. And once you get on Beacon Street, you're basically there for most of the way to the rest of the race. The next turn will be when you make the turn on the right on Hereford Street. So like again, while it is a net downhill, there will be some rolling hills. So like, don't let that psych you out. I promise you there'll be more downhill coming ahead of you. Just, again, modulate the effort, keep it even, keep it easy. There is a part where you go, I think probably the toughest part for me is when you go under Mass Ave, because it's like, it happens roughly at mile 25, and it just sucks when you're trying to climb your way up from that. Then before you know that, once you get to that point, you're practically there. You're gonna be taking that right on Hereford and that left on Boylston Street, and you'll see that final straightaway, and it's just magic. You know, all the hard work you put in. I mean, even just thinking about it now, it gives me chills. Like it's the best finish and for any marathon out there, hands down. I mean, just based on what you just put yourself through, but all the hard work you did put in to train for it, even just to qualify for it. If we're a qualifier, everything really kind of hits you at that point. The crowds are screaming. They're usually 5 or 6 deep. You know, it's just a really, really amazing experience. And I hope you guys will all get to enjoy it. Next slide. So that is what the finish line looks like. That is what you have to imagine yourself getting to there. I hope that you all have safe travels to get to the Boston area if you're coming from far away. I hope that your training is going well. And if leading up to it, if you guys have any questions, my email is going to pop up on the next slide. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have any, logistics, race course, just my own opinion about different ways of approaching different sections of the course. Like Reem said, I've run this. I grew up running Newton Hills because I grew up on them. When I was running cross country, I did all my training on Newton Hills, and I've run the race course so many times in both directions that it's in the back. It's seared into my mind. So take advantage of that. If you have any questions, reach out to me.
All right, thank you, John. If anyone does want to come off mute now and ask John any questions while you have him live, feel free. Otherwise, he has left you with his email. You can also reach out to me at reem@qt2systems.com. If you want to have a copy of this deck, the recording will be put up live onto YouTube, and you'll see that on there within the next day or so. All right, John, I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Thank you so much for such a comprehensive presentation, and looking forward to tracking you and so many of our runners that are racing at Boston this year.
I'll see you guys out there.